On today's space edition of Innovate, space travel could soon be a matter of pressing the up button with a space elevator. NASA's latest concept in Mars travel, the Tumbleweed, completes its trial run on the Antarctic plateau. A specially adapted commercial plane experiments with zero gravity. And launch your DNA for the next best thing in space travel. While the world is waiting for man to return to the moon, American scientist Bradley C. Edwards has come up with an idea that's really out of this world. An elevator that climbs 100,000 kilometers into space. The elevator would climb on a ribbon made of nanotubes, which are tiny bundles of carbon atoms, many times stronger than steel. A cable would be attached to a platform on the equator. Dr. Edwards believes a space elevator would offer a cheap and safe form of space travel that could eventually be used to carry explorers to the planets. He pegs the cost at $10 billion, a relative pittance compared to previous space shuttles. NASA has already given the Institute more than $500,000 to study the idea, with Congress earmarking $2.5 million more. Believe it or not, Dr. Edwards is aiming for an initial version to be operating in 15 years, and if it eventuates, then going into space would be as easy as pressing the button. Many of us dream about travelling into space, but for astronauts the training can be a grueling process. Dutch astronaut Andy Kuipers was put through his paces ahead of the Delta mission to the International Space Station. Inside the Institute's hyperbaric chamber, he sat in a simulated high-altitude, low-pressure environment. Next, it was time to try on the so-called spacesuit. With cooling lines and an oxygen supply, the suit was designed to keep its shape if the pressure suddenly dropped inside the spacecraft. But it's not just the journey astronauts have to be ready for. Preparations were also made for time on board the International Space Station. They learnt everything from how to deal with the electrical systems to the weightlessness of space. There was a strong need to prepare for worst-case scenarios, such as how to bring the Russian spacecraft back to Earth independently. The astronauts were taught how to leave the spacecraft should it veer off course and land underwater. Finally, Andrei Kuipers managed to put his training to good use, and luckily, he didn't need the emergency training. At the end of his 2-week mission, he came back down to Earth safely. The Open University in Milton Keynes is home to the Planetary and Space Science Research Institute. It's also a place where some of the world's top scientists have dedicated their lives to uncovering the secrets of the universe. In the 80s, the first European comet mission was undertaken. A team studied the impact of cosmic dust from Halley's Comet, using information gathered by the Giotto probe in March 1986. Studies are now underway, looking at material from the Cassini-Huygens spacecraft, as well as waiting for information from the European Space Agency's Rosetta launch. When Rosetta was launched, scientists knew that they would have to wait 10 years before the Comet Chaser obtained any data. As for the Cassini-Huygens spacecraft, it finally began its orbit of Saturn after 6.5 years. Following in the path of Voyager, it is just one of the many spacecraft that will provide vital information to generations of scientists, past, present, and future. What do you do when you want to explore hundreds, perhaps thousands of kilometers of barren Martian terrain and send the information back to Earth? You let the wind provide the power. This is NASA's new concept in Mars travel, the Tumbleweed, and the idea works. NASA knows this because it recently tested a prototype, Tumbleweed rover, on the Antarctic plateau. The trial run was planned to see if the device would travel by wind power alone, and also if it would send back information as designed. During its 8-day journey across the ice, the Tumbleweed rover used a global satellite network to send information on its position, the surrounding air temperature, pressure, humidity, and light intensity to a ground station in California. The rover kept itself warm in 33° below temperatures by self-heating from its internal electronics and an internal air pump. The final Tumbleweed rover is envisioned as a lightweight device that can serve multiple roles as an independent robotic explorer. As long as there's an atmosphere, the rover could someday tumble for miles across the polar regions of Mars. It's been 30 years since a spacecraft visited Mercury. Now NASA scientists are making final preparations for Messenger to blast off on a journey to the planet closest to the Sun. Messenger will take 7 years to reach Mercury's orbit, making 15 loops of the Sun on the way. It will then spend 1 Earth year gathering data. Scientists hope the information will reveal more about the forces that shaped planets like our own. The information collected by Messenger will be invaluable to scientists, including the size and state of the core and the origin of the magnetic field. To do its job, Messenger is being equipped with 7 scientific instruments. An imaging system with wide and narrow angle high-resolution cameras will provide the first ever images of the entire planet. Mercury's proximity to the Sun has presented an unprecedented mission design challenge. The Sun is 10 times brighter than what we see on Earth, with surface temperature at Mercury's equator reaching 450 degrees Celsius. A second inquiry into the fate of Beagle 2, the British Mars probe which disappeared without a trace, has come no closer to discovering what happened. Beagle 2 vanished on Christmas Day 2003 as it approached the Red Planet on its mission to Mars. After a 6-month investigation, they still don't know what caused the mission to fail. Theories have included punctures in airbags, damage to the heat shield, or a broken communication antenna. Leaders from the Beagle 2 project have urged both the European Space Agency and the UK government to back another mission to Mars. A probe could be launched as early as 2007, but so far neither the UK government nor ESA have backed such a plan. Scientists believe this terrain is pretty close to what humans will encounter when they step out onto the surface of Mars. The region is remote, rocky, and there's little, if any, water. It's the Flinders Ranges in South Australia, and there's not much here apart from a few astronauts. The site has been chosen by the Mars Society, an international body of scientists, to create and test the equipment that will one day be used by humans to explore the Red Planet. Perhaps the greatest threat to exploring astronauts may not be physical. A 2.5-year journey away from Earth could impose enormous stress on minds. As a result, scientists are studying how the astronauts might cope in such a situation. The Mars Society is also planning to build a space research centre at the site. It's already constructed labs like this in the United States and Canada. When it's built in Australia, scientists will live and work there for months, replicating conditions in a Mars-like settlement. Another problem is that of solar radiation. The amount of radiation astronauts are exposed to in one day corresponds to about 10 chest X-rays. Even with protection against solar radiation, is a human colony on Mars really a possibility? An Airbus 300 takes off from Bordeaux, but this is no ordinary aeroplane. This is a specially adapted commercial plane capable of giving those on board an experience of a lifetime. 0G is a huge padded cell holding 40 passengers and 4 crew. The students on board, after completing their final preparations, monitor their experiments that occur through zero gravity. The powerful engine sends 0G into a steep climb. It climbs and descends at a 47-degree angle. Then, on the orders of the pilot, a mechanic turns down the power and the plane goes into freefall, creating a weightless environment. During these 2 phases, those on board are subjected to a pull of gravity, double that on Earth, before reaching weightlessness. After a descent as steep as the climb and 25 seconds later, 0G returns to a normal state of gravity. Parabolic flight first began in the 1950s, when early fighter pilots discovered it was difficult to coordinate their movements. The arrival of manned space missions led to parabolic flights becoming the norm as a way of training. It gave astronauts a taste of what life would be like aboard a space station. It was also found to be an excellent way of testing equipment destined for the International Space Station. The first rocket, funded by private enterprise, successfully touched down after an historic flight. It took humankind a step closer to the reality of mass space travel. Spaceship One, designed by pioneer aviator Burt Rutan and funded by Microsoft founder Paul Allen, was the winner of the X Prize, a $10 million prize for the first privately funded craft to reach an altitude of 100 kilometers. But the prize was not the only goal. On offer was the market for private space travel that could be worth billions. Everyone who had previously rocketed into space were able to do so because of government funding. But Spaceship One pilot Mike Melville was the first to make space a private domain. NASA has a budget of $15 billion a year and spends about $440 million on each space shuttle flight. It costs between $20 and $30 million to get Spaceship One into space today, which is just a 20th of the price. Cheaper flights mean more flights, along with the growing possibility that more people will have the opportunity of a lifetime. Scientists have announced that a huge sea of ice lies just under the surface of Mars and that it may harbour life. They hope that future astronauts may be able to tap into it as a source of fuel and possibly as drinking water. Mars seems to have once had water on the surface, and lots of it. There were deep canyons, one deeper and wider than anything on Earth, as well as places that look like dried-up lakes or seabeds. Now the surface is dry and dusty, and the ice that covers the poles is frozen carbon dioxide. NASA has used a range of instruments to see if there is water under the surface, and the evidence is strong. With these latest findings, scientists speculate that Mars might also conceal life. It certainly explains where some of the water went when Mars changed from being a warm and wet place to the cold, dry desert it is now. Engineers at Surrey Satellite Technology have spent 20 years building small Earth observation satellites for a variety of countries. The company's latest idea is to put a constellation of satellites into orbit around the Earth. Each smaller than a fridge, the aim is to help emergency services and relief teams respond better to natural disasters. Images are taken in multispectral bands in 3 different colours. Combined, they identify different agricultural traits, including floods, landslides and forest fire damage. The information is then transferred to disaster relief agencies so they can assess what type of action should be taken. Conventional satellites pass a particular point on Earth only every few days. However, the network of small satellites in low orbit can beam back constant images of unfolding disasters. In 2003, British scientists revealed their hopes for Europe's first moon mission, a pioneering spacecraft exploring the chemical makeup of our nearest neighbour in space. Smart 1 was the European Space Agency's first ever mission to the moon. It aimed to reveal a series of lunar mysteries. During the mission, scientists communicated with the probe using a new laser-based system. The key component of the Smart 1 mission was an X-ray spectrometer, the smallest and lightest instrument of its type ever built. Its purpose was to scan unexplored regions of the moon, as well as scarred sections of the lunar surface that Apollo astronauts could never have visited. Smart 1 was the first probe to focus on the moon's south pole, where water may exist as ice within the perpetual darkness of crater walls. When Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey came out in 1968, space travel was mere science fiction. Nowadays, the classic space movie has gone digital. Astronauts make regular trips into space, and spaceships have landed on Mars, producing pictures of the unknown. In the US, a privately owned firm is planning to take space travel one step further. Encounter 2001 aims to take people closer to outer space by sending their hair samples, which include DNA, into the cosmos on a solar-powered sailcraft. They may not be able to climb aboard a spaceship personally, but it will be the next best thing. Powered by solar wind, the 4,900 square metre sailcraft will be taken into space by an Ariane V rocket. It will then take 13 years to surpass the orbit of Pluto and leave the solar system. For about $30 you can buy an Encounter Space Travel Kit, which includes a special form to paste a few photographs and write space-bound messages. It will be emitted by the sailcraft as it journeys into the far reaches of the galaxy. Another kit sells for $60, which allows you to send a bag of hair samples with the bulbs intact into space. There is ample interest in space and space travel the world over, and ordinary people are lining up for the chance to take part. Encounter 2001 sells most of its kits via the internet, but in Tokyo, sales started at a movie theatre. It was engineered to coincide with the worldwide release of the digital version of the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. While some people preferred to keep their feet and DNA firmly on the ground, some Japanese space enthusiasts took advantage of the chance to send their DNA soaring beyond the stars. For thousands of years, coffins have been the final resting place, but their days may be counted, as innovative alternatives are coming on the market. The ultimate in eccentricity has come in the form of deep space burials. For those who have gazed in awe at the sight of a shooting star, the possibility to become one is now a reality. Celestis is a US firm that has sent the cremated remains of over 150 people into space. They plan to make their unique service available in Europe through local funeral parlours. Celestis promises the ride of your dreams, offering 3 alternative burials. A small portion of the ashes are placed in a lipstick-sized plastic flight capsule. It can then orbit the Earth before vaporizing and blazing like a shooting star in the final tribute, or be buried on the Moon or launched into deep space. It's been almost 3 decades since humans set foot on the surface of the Moon. Since the last Apollo space mission in 1972, technology has improved in leaps and bounds. Now, with the incredible advances in technology since that historic era, private enterprises are now looking to the Moon as the next frontier for commercial development. The Moon has caught the eye of entrepreneurs. They see it as the land of vast mineral riches, an ideal adventure tourist destination, and an untapped resource just waiting for its first commercial landing. So, could it ever be possible to replenish the Earth's supply of gemstones and little-known rare metals? Or is it possible to send humans or even robots into space to set up mining ventures on the inhospitable surface of the Moon? An increasing number of private firms see no reason why not. They are racing to launch their own space mining missions. US-based Artemis Society International is helping sponsor a project to build a commercial manned moon base and plan to have its first lunar flight in the next 10 years. Technology is not the problem, rather just how to raise the massive amounts of cash required. Once built, one of the more profitable uses of the lunar base will be for adventure tourism. Under the Artemis model, a tourist will pay about $250,000 for the adventure. Private firms are competing to establish commercial lunar mining. They are convinced there is a lucrative market for what they might ship back to Earth. One of the companies is Applied Space Resources. They aim to send an unmanned spacecraft to an unexplored region of the Moon and return the first lunar samples to Earth in more than 25 years. In the French Pyrenees, a group of teenagers have discovered the delights of robots, space rockets, sounding balloons, and the mysteries of the universe. Youth organisation Planet Science welcomes 25 teenagers every summer for 3 weeks of scientific discovery and relaxation. This unusual summer camp creates a fun environment in which 13 to 15-year-olds can take on technological challenges. One experiment was the construction of a homemade micro-rocket and the transformation of a field into a launch pad. After perfect takeoffs, the rocket reached a height of 200 metres. The camp offers plenty of science and a chance for the kids to get together, all under the watchful eye of staff. The experiments have been built with supervision and necessary safety precautions. The most serious students carry out a range of experiments using real-sounding balloons. Through a helium-filled balloon, atmospheric pressure and temperatures are monitored by the project's creators. After a successful launch, the balloon reached the very respectable altitude of 34 kilometres before blowing up. All the measurements were carefully recorded in a specially equipped truck provided by France's National Space Studies Centre. Finally, it was time for the amateur astrologers to discover the secrets of the universe. At the end of the camp, a myriad of experiences were taken home, almost as many as there are stars in the night sky. This is a fairy tale wedding made in heaven, where love triumphed over all. Russian cosmonaut Yuri Malenchoko, commander on board the International Space Station, was set to marry Russian immigrant and Texan belle Ekaterina Dmitriev. They were due to tie the knot via an Earth-to-space telephone and satellite link, making space history along the way. This was against the wishes of Russian authorities, who had previously strongly discouraged the cosmonaut from going ahead with the wedding. The officials cited security concerns. Yuri was a military officer and was subject to strict regulations on marrying a foreigner. Also, procedures for a space wedding had never been written up in the cosmonaut code of conduct. But Russian officials were powerless to keep their love-stricken ISS commander from going through with his wedding. And even though they did not approve, they were somewhat proud of creating another space first. Huge plumes of electrified gas pour into space from the sun at over 3 million kilometres per hour. These periodic flare-ups of solar activity can affect weather patterns on Earth and knock out power systems and satellites. Solar physicist Professor Richard Harrison is working on a new space program to image these violent gas clouds from the sun. The STEREO mission will consist of 2 satellites in space, giving a more rounded picture of the sun. It should help provide advanced warning of solar storms impacting the Earth and greatly improve our understanding of the workings of our own star. Well, that's it for our Space Edition. We hope you join us next time on Innovate.